Hi, I'm Emma and I'm the Education Manager for the Liverpool Playhouse. And today we are on our way to London to the Jerwood space to get a little sneaky preview into the rehearsals for the Resistible rise of Arturo. We're very much looking forward to this because it's our big production of the autumn season 2011. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Very pleased to be here.
You're the director of the Resistible rise of Arturo. Very exciting. It's our big show this autumn. Could you just, for the audience, could you just give us a little bit of an insight into what the show's about?
It's basically a parable about Hitler's rise to power in the 1920s till when he came to office in 1933, and then it basically stretches from the late 20s until Hitler actually invaded Austria until 1938. So it's basically a time of 8 years, basically, which are historically. But what Brecht does is using, that's why it's a parable, a gangster world to tell Hitler's rise to power. So it's basically based, the character Arturo is based both on Al Capone and on Adolf Hitler.
The great thing about this, what we're doing here, is there's a new translation as well by Sharkey, which is fantastic. It's very muscular, it's very modern, it's colloquial. So that's a way of allowing a younger audience or any sort of contemporary audience in. But what we're actually showing is it's called the Resistible rise. I think it's because Hitler's rise to power was so resistible. Had things been different, had he been a different person, had the times been different, had certain things happened at different points in his rise, it would never have happened.
It's that whole knock-on effect. Yeah.
I think it's a bit, I'm not saying like Brecht's way, but for me, I'm German myself. I studied in Berlin at an academy which was former East Berlin, so very much in the tradition of Brecht, basically. And to do this piece now in England and in Liverpool, with English actors, but actually in an American version, is a bit like the Brechtian way of telling this story sort of about Germany through the Al Capone story. And for me, basically, to tell a story about German history, which is a very dark period of German history, with English actors in Liverpool, is very exciting.
The idea of making it a gangster movie, a gangster spectacle, which is what it's called, it's the Resistible rise of Arturo, a gangster spectacle, is that it makes it much more understandable to a modern audience because of the language of film.
I think from what I can understand, Brecht wants the actor to be able to play a role, but for the audience to be able to see that it's an actor playing a role. So you must be able to tell the story and do justice to the story and to the character, but it's the opposite to method, basically. So it's not all this feeling and emotion, because then that clouds the image, the message.
And I think there's a big misunderstanding about Brecht, that he did want to move people as well, and he really said, please be engaged 100%. But what he then made sure is, there's like in this scene, there's a cut, and immediately the actor stops acting and returns to being the person he is. So the characters are sort of shown as they are, and at the same time Brecht was very clear about that. He just wanted to say this is a piece of theatre, so they're actors playing these parts, and the next moment they can be back to being who they are.
Just in terms of the rehearsal process then, and thinking about how it will be Brechtian in practice, have you thought about yet how you might rehearse, or what you will apply to it that makes it typically Brechtian?
I mean, we only met yesterday, so it's all new for everyone. But I think the main thing I'm trying to work out with everyone is to get an understanding of that Brechtian characters are, on the one hand, they are meant to be three-dimensional. So it's not about being scared that this big word of alienation effect, every English actor goes like, I can't do that, or what is this about?
Yeah.
It is basically doing your research on the character, and the great thing here is historically there's so much to actually gather, and we're just doing that at the moment to talk about the characters. So, but at the same time, I think what Brecht was very much about is in German it's the word Gestus, and I think it's a translation of gesture basically. So what he was very interested in is not so much the psychology of a character, but much more of what that represented. So, for example, there are capitalists in this. The first scene is all about Junkers, and so at the time they were big landowners. So, how to translate that nowadays is like Wall Street bankers, basically.
Yeah.
So, what I'm trying to do with the actors is to find typical gestures, also physical gestures, which represent power.
The play speaks for itself. I don't think we're going to get, I don't particularly want to get too bound up with the idea of it being Brechtian, because I think that is sort of, it's
The play does that
retrogressive,
anyway.
it's pejorative, it doesn't allow the play to breathe. It is what it is, and it will be what it is.
Yeah, I agree.
He doesn't want the audience to get all cosy and fall asleep. He wants them to be constantly asking questions.
Yeah, and engaged in that. So what about just very finally, in terms of decisions that you've made about design and the aesthetic of the piece?
Yeah.
Can you explain those a little bit? Or?
Yeah, I think what we were very keen on, it's an urban story, it's Chicago. Basically starting from an empty stage almost, which is a concrete floor. We're telling an urban story, it's all concrete. And the actors and the stagehands will bring in all set elements, like walls or a piece of a bar, but it's all in concrete basically. So even a bar, there's a big bar being wheeled in, it has the style of, it's a bit abstract basically.
Yeah.
And, but it all comes from an idea of an empty stage, so nothing is masked.
No.
You will see the actors getting changed in the side wings.
Is that what we're going to see?
Yeah, you're going to see that.
Brilliant.
So it's,
That's
nothing it's all going to be open, and Uwe and his gang will be constantly present in the background. You will constantly see them lurking, so to get into power. So that, then we have contemporary elements, like it's called live ticker. Is that right? You know, from the Stocks and Shares.
Oh, a live ticker.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have a huge live ticker, which is 8 meters wide, where you constantly have shares racing past. Then we've got some other elements which are like in the betting office. We have really contemporary elements in there, and at the same time that's juxtaposed with costumes from the period. So the period, the costumes are all from 1930s, but elements in the set are really now contemporary.
It sounds great.
So yeah, it's this constant mixture. What Brecht in a way was doing as well, constantly playing with, like he was doing with Chicago and Germany, we're doing with the past and the present basically. So a sort of tension between the two basically.
Because it's so specific, and a lot of the characters are kind of very, very easy to relate back to Adolf Hitler's men. Will you really use his story to inform your performance?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's quite a tricky one because Goebbels physically is the opposite to me. He was very skinny and same height, similar height, but very skinny and quite gaunt, and had a club foot and a shorter leg than the other. He wanted to be an artist. He wrote poetry, he wrote books and plays, but none of them were ever published or performed because they weren't any good. And he didn't have much luck with women in the early stages of his kind of manhood, 20s, and I think it wasn't until he was sort of in his 30s that he started to have more sort of success with women, and then he became a bit of a womanizer. So Givola in the play, you don't really get an essence of that with what he says and what he does. They're very different, they're kind of poles apart, in that you know, Givola's quite sort of out there and quite sort of he doesn't come across as being particularly intellectual.
But that doesn't mean that he's not
But
necessarily.
exactly, yeah.
Finally, end it on a good note. What are you looking forward to most about this whole process?
Ooh,
What excites you?
the end.
No!
The opportunity to tackle one of the great roles of 20th century European drama, I think.
I think you put it beautifully there. Thank you very much, Ian. We'll leave it there. Thank
you
you very much for your time. So we are now nearly back in Liverpool after our trip down to London to the Arturo rehearsals, and we hope very much that this film has inspired you to want to come and see the show. Don't forget to book your tickets soon. It opens on Friday the 30th of September and is only on for 3 weeks, so get your tickets booked and we'll see you there.